Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about overcoming self-criticism for positive growth. What a positive topic, pun intended. And I really love talking about growth in general. And when it comes to growth, we know that there are so many things that can stop us, so many things that can hinder us along the way, especially when it comes to personal growth. And in the context of well-being, this is even more important because we struggle with a lot of voices inside our head on the daily, I would say. Self-criticism is definitely one of those, at least for me. So if you relate to this topic, you're here in the right place. And I'm excited to talk to our guest today, Mylira Green, about it. I'm going to introduce her, and I'm also going to ask her to share a bit about her professional journey with us. So Mylira Green is a certified complex trauma professional functioning as a licensed clinical social worker who serves as a psychotherapist, confidence coach, master healer, transformative speaker, clinical supervisor, and adjunct professor. She strives to provide the world with preventative services to lower the rate of suicide worldwide. Thanks so much for joining us today, Mylira.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, you just told me something super interesting, which is the fact that you did a TEDx talk on this topic yesterday.
I did. It's something that I've wanted to do for years, and I happened to put it on Facebook one day. I said I was going to do a commencement speech and a TEDx talk before the end of 2023. And 2 weeks later, there was an interview to do a TEDx speech right here in my local area, and I was blessed to be one of the speakers. So I'm super duper honored to really shine light on people utilizing self-love as a way to lower that self-criticism or that bully that's in your mind.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing. Actually, one of my life goals is also to be able to give a TED talk. But when people ask me what kind of topic do you want to talk about, I'm like, I'm not sure yet. That's the point, right? For you to be able to be at a TEDx talk or TED talk, it means that you have to be really passionate about something. And the message has to carry weights. So, I'm sure that the TEDx talk went well, and I cannot wait to see it when it's live, or maybe it's already live. So the question here is, you're so passionate about this topic that you gave a TEDx talk about it. So why? How did your professional journey unfold to the point that you're here, you're doing all this amazing work and giving a TEDx talk? And, why did you choose this line of work in the first place? It's quite niche.
Absolutely. So I remember being 13 years old and that being the first time I ever had a suicidal ideation that I did not want to live anymore. I was the youngest of my freshman class, and at the time they would do like a physical in the beginning of school, and my gym teacher said, "Hey, I have to weigh everybody." So I got on the scale, and the scale weighed 215 pounds, and where I am, that means that you are morbidly obese, which is essentially saying that you're not healthy. And it was at that moment that I felt as if I was not valuable. I felt like that I wasn't worthy. I felt like that there was something desperately wrong with me. And that was the first time in my entire life that I just felt like life just was not worth living. And from there, I really struggled a lot with depression. I struggled a lot with my self-image. And most importantly, I struggled a lot with my self-love. I became my own worst enemy in my mind. I told myself that I would never be anything. I told myself that I would never be lovable enough. And because I came from such an amazing family, people did not know that I was struggling silently with this. So I literally suffered until I was 17 years old and I was a freshman in college, and I almost took my life. That was my first time having a suicide attempt, if you will. And it was in that moment where I realized I had to do something better. I was tired of living in this dark cloud. And believe it or not, my mom is who chose the field of social work for me. And she couldn't have chose any better, because me preparing to go to college, I was extremely depressed because it was my first time being sexually assaulted during that time. So I literally had trauma on top of trauma, but then I found a career that helped me help heal myself. It helped show me what are the tools to help other people grow forward. And I jumped head first into being a social worker. And come December, I will be a social worker now for 10 years. And it has truly blessed my life. And from there, I literally jumped into learning, how do I help people change their environment where they can become the best version of themselves? And I became my first client. I started to go to therapy. I started to meet with mentors and coaches. I really niched down by getting my master's in a clinical concentration in children and families because I wanted to understand how to heal little Mylira, the Mylira that nobody came and actually talked to and say, "Are you okay?" And once I got to a point where I felt like I was whole enough to help others was when I really took this journey seriously, and I got some certifications in trauma and anxiety and couples counseling. And I turned it into a business and a career where I can help people not be the 17-year-old me that wants to commit suicide. Because here in the United States alone, we have 139 successful suicides every day. So if I could do my part by whoever comes in contact with me to know that their life is worth living, that is why I became a social worker and why I'm so passionate about everything that I do, because I once was that person that didn't want to live and somebody gave me CPR. So I have dedicated my life to do the same for others.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear about all the things that happened to you in the past. Like that's definitely just like you said, trauma upon trauma and just, a lot happening. And thank you for sharing your story with the world. I think it's an act of bravery, and it's actually really important for us to be able to hear stories and the truths, because it's so hard to open up about these things. And I'm also glad to hear that you found, sort of your calling or your purpose, after all of that. And it's extremely hard. So I could only try to imagine, how you got here. And I'm glad we're here together to talk about today's topic, because if anyone could talk about this topic, it's definitely you. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to learn more about the topic very soon. And before we do that, we have a little segment that I like. We call Have You Met Mylira? And this is where we get to know you better through some of your favorite things. And the first thing that I ask all my guests, and this is my favorite question because I love reading, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book would have to be by a young lady that's named Nona Jones, and it's called Killing Comparison. And believe it or not, that is one of the books that really helped me with my own self-criticism. I realized from reading that I would compare myself to so many other people that I didn't see my value and my worth. And in that book, she takes you through tangible steps of really how to not count yourself out because other people are succeeding, but how to celebrate others' success because you too are your own success. And that has been so transformative for me because no matter how nice I am, my Achilles heel is envy. Because I'm such a nice person and I find myself sometimes looking at others' lives like, why can't I have what they have? Or why didn't I get that phone call? Or why wasn't I on that stage? But it was that book that let me realize that I can celebrate their wins and still have wins of my own. I can celebrate where they are and still see my value and my worth. So it will have to be The Killing Comparison by Nona Jones, hands down, is my favorite book right now.
That is a new one for me. So thank you for sharing that. Another book on my list. I wonder now which movie you've been enjoying recently.
So I love all things Christmas holiday movies. It doesn't matter what it is. I don't care if it's Hallmark, Lifetime, Amazon Prime, any of them. But Christmas by far is my favorite time of year. And I adore love. I adore seeing people fall in love with the cheesy Christmas Town movies and how they wasn't supposed to be together, but then they ended up together. So I don't have just one. It is literally binge watching every Christmas movie that I can find right now on my Amazon Fire Stick. That is what I'm loving at this current moment.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you for that. I mean, for our audience benefit, just in case it doesn't make sense, well, we are recording this episode quite close to Christmas. It might get released, early next year. I'm not sure. But I think that's probably why you're mentioning all the Christmas movies. So yeah, but I mean, like, actually, I don't celebrate Christmas per se, but I have to say all the Christmas movies are really well done. And they're kind of like, I don't know, there's just something about them that are so sweet and makes you happy. And yeah, I think if you really love Christmas, then you can actually watch those movies any time of year. It doesn't have to be
I
the
literally watch
season.
them January to December. So whenever you hear this, you're going to see Mylira watching some type of holiday movie, whether it's
Yeah,
Thanksgiving, Christmas, but just honestly anything that's dealing with happiness, joy. We have so much stress in the world that
yeah.
when I can turn on one of those movies, I don't think about that stress. I get to kind of laugh at the cheesiness and the storylines that you already know they're going to fall in love and get married at the end, but it's worth it. And so I watch it
Yeah.
all year round.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I really love that you say that because yeah, I do like watching Christmas movies too for some reason, even though I don't actually celebrate Christmas. Anyway, I wonder now if you are a fan of podcast, and if you are, which one is your favorite?
So I am a fan of podcasts, and right now my favorite would have to be one of my closest friends. He has Michael Talks to Everyone. He's actually an American comedian named Michael Collier, and I've had the privilege of being able to hear some of his podcasts where he talks to, when I say everybody, he may talk to some of his celebrity friends that he have, and then he'll talk to people like me who are just normal everyday people on different topics. And it's great that it's a actual genuine conversation. So if there's something that comes up and he's talking with someone and it happened to, spark his interest, he's jumping on a podcast with them that day. And it's really fun to see the human side of some of the people that we've taken our time to kind of see watching growing up, or even those people that I rub shoulders with sometimes, able to share their expertise. So I would have to say that right now has been the podcast that I have listened to the most, by supporting a friend, but then also being able to see the human side of those that I've watched on television for a lot of my life.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. And I love that you just gave your friend a shout out, even though it's not just about your friend, but also about the podcast. But yeah, beautiful. And now I would love to know if you have a role model or, several role models. And if yes, who are they?
So I do have several role models. The first one will be my shero. Her name was Michelle Austin. She is an angel now in heaven, but she had a rare stage of cancer, or a rare case of cancer, that she ended up succumbing to a few years ago. But her strength was immaculate. And during her entire life, she lived a full life, even in the midst of pain. And she showed me no matter what you endure, you get to choose joy, you get to choose peace, and you get to choose happiness. That every moment of your life is a choice. And I learned that from her. So definitely I will have to start with Michelle Austin for sure. Then I have my mother. I am my mother's daughter. We are very similar. Our stories are the same. And I count it a joy to be able to live out her wildest dreams here in this time. Like I was sharing, I did the TEDx speech, and that's one of her dreams. And her being able to see me on the stage doing it, my desire is that it sparked her to go back and dream again so that she can do it. So a lot of the things that I do in my life are different dreams that she shared, and I want to show her that her dreams can become reality. So I absolutely adore being able to live out my mother's dream and continue her footsteps for her. And then I'll also have to say another role model of mine right now is Jamel Lashley. And he's a really great individual. And what I've learned from him is how to unapologetically be yourself while still making sure that you authentically show up for those around you and love. Sometimes we get so wrapped into, as far as for women here, with working, and trying to build a legacy and doing these things. But he's someone that reminds me that it is okay for me to sit and rest and allow for people to provide and show up for me. And I have a hard time doing that. I'm the giver naturally. So to be able to see someone genuinely make space for others to just be is very beneficial. So those would be the three people that I would say are my biggest role models right now would be Michelle Austin, my mother, Myra Childs, and then Jamel Lashley.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing about your role models. I feel like that's just, whenever I hear these stories, because they're stories, they're not just like, oh, yeah, this is my role model and that's it. It's just amazing to hear how we carry ourselves or we go through life, with all of the, let's just say, the influence of people that we adore, right? And they make us who we are. And that's just beautiful because it's not just one person that inspires us many times, just like yourselves, multiple people. And they all sound like amazing humans to get to know. So thanks for sharing. Finally, in this part, I would love to ask you about a course you've taken that have really inspired you.
A course that I've taken that has really inspired me will have to have been I went through a sisterhood journey under a young lady, and it was in that space that I started to learn who I genuinely was as a individual beyond my trauma. With all the things that I've endured in my life, my trauma became the definition of who Mylira was. But it was in this sisterhood healing space. And her name was Lovey Bradley. And in this space, it was myself and about 5 of the young ladies came together weekly where we shared our stories, but then we also shared the things that we were going to change to become the best version of ourselves. And that for me started, honestly, my healing journey. It started me seeing that I do have a feminine energy in me, even though my trauma makes me be a little bit more masculine because of I want to protect myself. It allowed for me to see that I could rely on my family and my ancestors and being able to appreciate the guidance of those who are outside of myself and how I'm not alone and I'm not by myself. It gave me sisters for life that even if we don't talk every day, when we do talk, is like we never skipped a beat, and being able to see our growth separately and together. That for me was life changing because I was able to finally see that Mylira was special, that there was something about me that the world needed to see and needed to endure. And I actually took that course, I want to say probably over 5 years ago. And that really started me seeing that there was something special about me and I needed to find out what that was to be able to really give the world the true gift of who I am.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like, it's definitely a course that is so special to you and so close to your heart, and it has helped you so much on your, personal growth journey. So definitely something great to learn about. And I think we all need those courses in our lives, right? Like no matter which stage we're in, I'm not talking about the specific course per se, but when there are times when we're just kind of in doubt or we're not sure what to do, where to go, I feel like we all have those moments. It's just great to be able to find a course that you can relate to, that can really guide you through the process, because sometimes we might not be lost, but we still need a bit of guidance. And, that's what learning is about. So, yeah, I think it's just a great thing to remember. And I'm talking to the audience, but also talking to myself. Like, I need to find a course like that for myself, to kind of renew my understanding of who I am, just like yourself. Now, we're here today to talk about overcoming self criticism for positive growth. And positive growth is exactly what you went through thanks to the course and, through all of your learning in life and training and certification. So, we're going to have I'm pretty sure we're going to have a fun time talking about this topic. But since we're talking about well-being on the show, let's set the scene by talking about well-being. So what does well-being mean to you, Mylira?
Well-being to me means that I accept myself for who I am. That in my mind, I know who I am because of whose I am. And what do I mean by that? We all came from something. Whatever our belief system is, it doesn't matter the belief system, but whatever that is, there was a form of a creator there. And I have to believe that the way that that individual, that person, that she, that he, that entity, that parent, whatever, that I was created was something that is worth living. And when I know that meaning in life is what starts that feeling of wellness. Well-being is where even when everything around me is going awry, I know that this is only temporary. Well-being is, that I have temporary moments where I have a challenge, but it doesn't take me out for the entire time. There's a gentleman named Les Brown, and he says, most people die at age 30. They just don't get buried into their 70. When I think of well-being, I think of people who are actually living fully and they're not zombies, that they're able to continue to get up every day. Even if yesterday was a hard day, today they start the day with, I'm going to do better. Those individuals that continue to dream and have an imagination. Those individuals that continue to love even when love hurts. That person that takes care of their physical health, whether that's exercise or what you eat, being intentional with everything that you do around you. That person that understands that they cannot do this life by themselves and alone, and they connect with the right, what I call charger cords to their cell phones, their charger cords in their life. So when I think of well-being, I think of holistically that person having harmony in all the dimensions of their lives because they're choosing to, this moment is a new moment and I'm going to come with a different mindset. So that's what well-being means to me.
Yeah, I really love that definition. I really appreciate the fact that you pointed out, we only are living when we are not like zombies, like we're actually doing meaningful things and, we feel engaged in life. And I feel like that is so important because there are some days when I ask myself, like, oh, am I just going through the day or am I actually living? It's so different. There's such a big difference there. And I guess a lot of people, if they are tuning into this podcast or any other LMSL podcast, that's probably why they're here. So, I think today's topic is definitely related to that because we won't be able to achieve much if we have self-criticism in our head all the time. And we're not going to be able to grow in a positive way. So again, really, just really on point for this topic. And I think it's also, as I mentioned before to the audience, it's towards the end of the year when we're recording this episode. And I feel like for me, talking to you about this now is actually really timely personally. So, I'm hoping I'm going to gain a lot of insights from you today. But before we get into that, I have another question related to well-being. Now, this is a question that we ask all the time on the show, but each time we get something new. So I would love to hear from your perspective what you think people get wrong when it comes to well-being. There might be a whole heap of misconceptions out there. So I would love to know the biggest ones you think people are encountering nowadays.
The biggest thing I would say is we suffer from the disease of perfectionism. When I want it to look perfect, I'm going to procrastinate because it doesn't look the way that I think it's supposed to look. So when it comes to well-being, I tell people use what you have. It doesn't always look like having money to go get your nails done and getting a massage, joining a gym. Sometimes it may look like I'm going to use my shower as my therapeutic time in my day, where I turn off all the lights and I light a candle and I find a fragrance that makes me feel good, that I'm already going to take a shower. So let me make that therapeutic. It may look like, okay, I might already be running late to work. So I'm going to give myself 3 more minutes to actually sit back and meditate before I run into my job because I'm already late. So what is 3 extra minutes of me taking care of myself? It might look like utilizing a free YouTube video instead of going to the gym and doing body weight workouts. Sometimes it's really, when it comes to well-being, what we get wrong is we think it should look one way when we can just use what we have access to now. And then as we're doing that, it brings such a joy that we might find the room to bring the finances to be able to do it how we want to do it. But sometimes you're just starting somewhere. And I think that is the biggest barrier, is that we look at our favorite social media influences and how they go to the best gym and how they go on vacations and they spend all this money on their nails and their hair, and that's what we desire. However, they had to start somewhere. And I think if people can utilize what they have, it will make it a little bit easier for all individuals to begin to start to do better with their well-being.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was thinking about it the other day, and I actually talked to one of my best friends about this. We actually talked about our gratitude practice. Speaking of perfectionism, right? We were saying, it's something that is so tricky because when I feel great, I want to do it. When I don't feel great, I don't want to do it. And when you don't feel great is when you actually want to do the gratitude practice to make you feel better. And we were kind of like, oh, why is that? And then I realized, we were kind of beating ourselves up there, like it's okay if we miss a day or if we miss a week, as long as we know that it's something we can always return to and, do our best with it. And not doing it for 2 weeks doesn't mean it's not great. So now you cannot do it anymore, just like meditation or anything else, right? And I feel like that is such a big part of well-being, the self-criticism, like, oh, I'm not doing this well, so I'm not going to do it anymore. And that affects your whole routine. And then that affects your well-being in general. And I'm reminding myself of this every day because I think I'm pretty tough on myself. And sometimes that just hinders me taking care of myself well. And I guess that's what this topic is about. So now let's talk about self-criticism. I think, it's kind of like a word that we all know, but perhaps there's more to it that we don't see. And sometimes we probably don't even spot self-criticism. So first of all, what is it? And second of all, how can we spot it?
So self-criticism to me is the inner bully in your mind before the world can tell you that there's something wrong with you. I tell people all the time, your brain is this misinformed best friend that tries to protect you. So before somebody else outside of you can tell you that you messed up, tell you that you're not valuable, tell you that you're not important, your brain says, well, I'm going to tell you that based off the experiences that you have. And if I tell you that when the world tells you, it's just confirmation. And now you know that you're this horrible individual and human being that need to continue to be better and better and better and better. That self-criticism is our brain's way of trying to protect us. But if you're not aware of that, then you won't practice the positive self-talk, which kind of is that piece of the spotting. I ask people all the time, how do you talk to yourself? Would you be your own friend if you thought about how you talk to yourself? If you would not even be a friend to you based off of the language that you give yourself, then that is that self-criticism. That is the you tearing yourself down. That is the you not seeing your value and your worth. And then what ends up happening is, if I don't see my value and worth, then I'm going to stop living. Then I'm also going to project and act as if everybody else around me doesn't see my value and worth, when we do have people around us that genuinely love us and genuinely care about us and want to see that we do well. So the way that we spot it is by checking our self-talk. Are you saying loving words to you, or are you constantly criticizing yourself? Do you ever maximize the mistakes that you make and minimize the things that you should be celebrating? Those are the things that we really want to begin to start spotting, as if I am extremely critical of myself. Also, inspecting our expectations. And I got that from Bishop Courtney Macbeth. He said, we have to inspect our expectations. If I set an expectation for myself, I need to see why I have not accomplished it yet. Is it because I told myself that I can't do it? Or is it because genuinely I have a challenge? Is it because I told myself that this is too big of a task for me? Or is it genuinely because I need to get some help? So really being able to engage in those self-reflective activities then I can start seeing if the reason why I haven't accomplished the things that I've said I want to accomplish is because I didn't believe that I can do it. Because all things in life, every choice starts with faith and belief, that I believe that this is going to be the best thing for me, that I believe that I can execute it. And if my internal compass is telling me that I cannot, then guess what? I'm not. And that's what I think we need to start doing as far as being able to reflect if we are our internal cheerleader or our internal bully when it comes to self-criticism.
That's a really good point. That's a good question to ask. Are we our internal cheerleader or are we our internal bully? That's wow. Okay. I want to keep that in mind today and remember that so I can check in with myself. Really great point. I feel like it's a blurred line sometimes though, because, tough love is a thing. And sometimes we're like, oh, like just get up and do it. And why are you being so, lazy or something? And then we're like, just do it. But I feel like there's a balance there to be struck because on certain days we need to push ourselves. And on other days, we need to be easy on ourselves. So it depends on a lot of different factors, right? Even a cheerleader or like a coach sometimes would yell at you. So you keep going, keep pushing. It's just like how I think about working out, like at the gym. Like I love being yelled at. Sometimes like keep going, not in the sense that you're using mean words or anything, but it's more like, okay, just 1 minute, keep going, one last minute, keep going. And I feel like sometimes if we don't choose the words wisely, it might become like a bully situation. But then, if we use the right words and the right way to go about it, then it is still cheerleading, but it's kind of like tough love, in my opinion. What's your take on that?
No, I do believe that. There's actually a 5-second rule that Mel Robbins coined, and her thing is you have 5 seconds to trick your brain into doing what you don't want to do, right?
Yep.
And it goes back to that inspecting the expectations. If I set a goal and I'm still not accomplishing it, I need to see what's keeping me from doing it. And 9 times 10 is myself. So if I say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and at 1, my foot hits the ground, or I start that paper, or I make that phone call when I get to 1, whatever it is, I do need to push myself. It's just the fact of, for me, there are times where the reason why we don't do the things before we even get to the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule is because we've already counted ourselves out. Like, why would I live life if I've already counted myself out of life? Like, how am I going to show up for life if I've already said it's not worth living? If I haven't been able to find the meaning. So a lot of that harmony and balance don't really come until I see that I am valuable enough to even live in the first place. So once I know that I'm valuable enough to live, then we can incorporate the 5-second rule. Then we can be that big push or that person that pushes. But one thing that I've noticed is for some people, we don't believe in validation. And there are some people who are looking for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Mel Robbins. So I'm so glad you mentioned her in your answer. I think, another thing about self-criticism, though, is I think sometimes the toughest part is realizing that it is a thing and start asking ourselves the question. So, I mean, if our audience are tuning into this episode, chances are they recognize that it is a thing and they're, actively trying to work on it. But then for other people, it's actually quite hard because they don't even hear themselves and they don't even know that self-criticism is there. And I guess this is not something that we can resolve, because if awareness is the key, right? So if they don't know, then it's really hard to change. So I guess my point is, if we have a great support system, our support system can help us to identify it. And I think when we realize how important it is for us to spot and to correct ourselves when we are, falling into that trap of self-criticism, we can, really tune into it and grow along and work on it. And that's why the power of our social circles and networks are so important. And I would love to ask you, because, if I'm going to go to a friend who does not know anything about this or who's not even recognizing that they are, they have self-criticism, I think the key point would be to point out how that is affecting their well-being. And that would really help them to actually think about it, just try to raise that awareness in the first place, right? So how do you think self-criticism impact our overall well-being?
So it impacts greatly because it is the inner dialogue in our minds that really impact how we navigate life. I tell people all the time, our reality has zero to do with what we see, but all to do with what we believe. It starts in your mind first. I know some miserable millionaires that because in their mind it's just not enough, they live this life miserably. And I know some people who are homeless with no roof over their head that are the happiest people in life. And it's because in their mind, they've created this reality of joy, happiness, and peace and trust and all those things. So when it comes to the self-criticism aspect of it, it really starts with your inner dialogue. But what I've also learned is we don't do a lot of communicating about the inner dialogue. We are very transactional individuals. We come to people for what we need in that moment. So very few people have someone that's asking simple questions like, what matters to you today? Not just how are you, but what is the matters of your heart? What do you need support with? What do you need help with? Because a lot of times what ends up happening is we have what we call constructive criticism, which reinforces the self-criticism. But if I come to you and I care about the matters of your heart and we deal with the matters of your heart first, when I give you that constructive criticism, you're going to be more open to it. And now we can stop that self-criticism because now you're seeing it's coming from a place of love because that's an interest in what you care about. And I think that right there is going to help eliminate self-criticism in its course, because if I have someone that is constantly being in tune with what's really going on with my life and they deal with what's going on with me and then they give me a solution, I am more acceptive of what they're giving me than if they just come to me with a bunch of criticisms on top of what I've already criticized myself. And then secondly, it would be sometimes you have to have help. I am a therapist, but I go to therapy myself. I'm a life coach, but I have a life coach myself. We all need a safe place to share what we're really going through. And it might not be that family member or their friend because people can only give you what they have. If that person themselves don't know that they're self-criticizing themselves, and then now they're projecting that self-criticism on you and judging your life and all these things, they're not going to be able to give you that safe place to just dump and share. So I tell people, sometimes it's having a professional in your corner that you can go and talk to so you can start to share with them, well, these are my thoughts. And then when they give the feedback, you're more receptive to that feedback. So that will be a way that I would say how people can really start to shift from self-criticism to self-acceptance, because once I accept it, then I can actually begin to move forward and do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that perspective, because I think that's true. And this is going back to my point earlier, when I decide to go to a friend and tell them about self-criticism in themselves, if they haven't identified it, it's probably going to be harder to kind of say, oh, it's bad for you. But it's actually easier and probably better if I flip that and tell them how it would be so much better if there's no self-criticism. So it's kind of like a more positive light, so they can actually see it and maybe start to think about it. Because, actually, now that I'm thinking, when you mention something that is kind of negative, people tend to not want to hear it. So, reframing it in a positive way might help. So those 2 points that you just mentioned would really help with that. Now, I would love to also know from your perspective as a psychologist and, like lots of other credentials that you have. Obviously, you've worked with a lot of people, and, you've done a lot of work on yourself as well. How and why do you think all these self-criticism habits start to form? Because it's not a positive thing, right? But then somehow we all have a tendency to self-criticize.
Yeah. So as a licensed clinical social worker, I had to study a lot what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. And there's a concept within this modality that talks about core beliefs. And our core beliefs are generally formed in our childhood of unresolved problems or things that either we did not discuss or did not resolve. And that criticism comes from the one moment that we heard something. it could have been the best memory ever, but it's a one statement that somebody said. So for example, my first suicidal ideation came when I was 13 years old, and I remember verbatim what my gym teacher told me when she told the whole class that I was 215 pounds. It wasn't the fact that I didn't know what my weight was because I just had a physical at my doctor. It was the tone that she said it, and it was how she said it. And it was in so much disgust that I took that on. So no matter if I had friends around me and I just had a bunch of fun and life is great, but the moment she said, Mylira, do you know that you are 215 pounds? With a face of disgust, with a face of like, I can't believe this person is like this, that became a core belief for me. That told me that I wasn't valuable for the rest of my life. That told me that I wasn't enough for the rest of my life. And it's those moments that create the self-criticism. Even when people ask me about suicide, they say, well, why do people commit suicide? It's never because of what they have. It's about the one thing they don't have. It's the same thing with self-criticism. I can have a family, I can have friends that tell me how lovable I am, how amazing I am, but it may be this one person that happened to say to me on the wrong day something that is contrary to what I know, and that sticks with me. And if I don't deal with it, it's going to continue to stick with me, which is why in cognitive behavioral therapy, we talk about restructuring and reframing the cognitions that's in your brain, the messaging that you tell yourself, because we all have messaging that we have to get rid of. That's not our own voice. Every negative thought I have, I can tell you the origin of it. I can tell you who said what. I can tell you how it made me feel. And until we deal with those moments, and that's why when it comes to just self-love in general, one piece I talk about is like embracing your story to really conceive your purpose. And it's because if I don't go back and acknowledge my story, then I can't kill the criticism, because the criticism is coming from something that's no longer in my now. It's somewhere that's stuck in my past. It's something that happened beforehand. It was a situation. It was a lesson that I should have learned and been able to move forward. But instead, I continue to have pop quizzes of this same thing because I haven't dealt with the pain of it yet. So that's what I would say is really the lack of people really being able to talk about their pains in a way where they're not ashamed to be transparent. I'm asked all the time, like, are you afraid that you're ever going to get your license taken away because you're so transparent? And I always think I'm not, because if they do take it away from me, it just means I don't need it anymore, because there's people that need to hear my story so they can know that they're not by themselves, that I am a therapist that do all these great things, and people like to call me doc and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm just Mylira, the social worker right now. But I share these pieces because I want them to know that even me, someone who has the knowledge, the book work, the certifications, I too have struggles as well. So it's just being able to embrace our stories, to acknowledge that there are some things that have been done to us in the past that were unfortunate, and that we get the opportunity to rewrite those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I'm hearing from you is that sense of acceptance, of oneself and of the situation of whatever it is that's going on, right? And on top of that, you mentioned something at the beginning that really struck a chord with me. And I actually felt really sad when I hear it. It was the fact that, you had all these people telling you things about yourself that you're already aware, and they just made it worse somehow. So that self-criticism just got aggravated. So, this is not just about self-work. Obviously, it takes a community. It takes a whole village to actually work together to make everyone's, headspace a bit more positive. So obviously, there's so much that I want to say. And I think it's not just about us, it's also about the people that we surround ourselves with. But it starts with us, right? So let's start within ourselves, and then we'll go and we'll become better people, and then we'll inspire others. So if we were to talk about ourselves, again, there's a big piece of acceptance there. And there's a lot of rewiring, reframing the thoughts in our head. So how would you describe the process of going through, this acceptance? Because it's probably not going to be easy for a lot of us. We tend to see our imperfections quite quickly, and I actually really love Brene Brown as an author, and she has a book called The Gifts of Imperfections, and it just popped into my brain when you were talking about it. And I guess for this topic, it is so important because self-criticism is mainly because we think about our imperfections, because we think about our flaws all the time. How can we actually have a healthy sense of acceptance here to reframe that?
Absolutely. So I'll tell people it's never the destination that matters, it's the journey. Because you're going to get there when you're supposed to get there. And what I have been able to do with those that I work with is create a journey that is so intentional that they have no other choice but to face themselves. And I typically start out with an 8-week program. It's actually called my Metamorphosis Experience. And we really dive into who you are at the core so that you can accept you the way that you were born to be. Not the way that your parents told you, not the way the society tells you, not the way that your experiences tell you, but who you are. So we learn about harmony and the different dimensions of their lives. So we talk about your spiritual, emotional, mental, social, physical, and cash flow dimensions. And how being able to focus on each of those dimensions and having some goals and some plans there and being intentional with your 24/7, because we all get the same 24/7, is giving them back control over their life. If I can help you control your now and I get you present in your present, the past cannot have that much power, and the future you can't even think about because right now is all that matters. We also create a personal development plan together. They learn the truth that there's no two people the same. So that talks about that comparison. Like, instead of me trying to fill somebody else's shoes, let me fill my own shoes. Let me see what I was created to do. They learn how to embrace what makes them different. We actually go through a personality assessment where they take the Myers-Briggs assessment so that they can know who they are to the inner core of them. And the one that we take really tells them who they are as a professional, who they are in relationships, with their significant others, with their children, with the people in the workplace, how they show up socially, and us really breaking that down. And from there, it gives us strengths and weaknesses that we then go together and we explore. Your strengths is what actually brings value, and your weaknesses is what creates room for relationships. And we really kind of talk about that. Like, I'm a big person. If I can't really pull your past into right now until I can get you stable in your present. So in those 8 weeks, that's what we do. Once they graduate, then we go into the past, where I bring in the cognitive behavioral therapy. They learn what that is. They learn what their core beliefs are. They learn what their cognitive distortions are. And we begin to really dive into their story. What happened in your life that gives you this messaging that you have? And then let's see, is there validity to this? Let's break this down. Is this a reliable source? Are you, looking at something as if it's black and white when it's a little bit more complicated? We really dive into that, because once we can dive into it and I can make you aware of what you think about that's actually causing you to make temporary decisions that have lasting impact, then I can actually go into your trauma. So my specialty is trauma. A lot of the people that I work with, 90% of all people have experienced some form of a traumatic experience, whether it's those big experiences or lower experiences. So once I teach you how to really take control over your thinking, which then impacts how you feel and how you actually behave, now we actually go into your trauma narrative. And this is where I help people tell their story. All of my clients leave me with telling their story, and we do it in chapters so that they can actually go through story by story. They're just going to write it out rawly. When they write it out rawly, then they read it out to me. They go back and they input what their thoughts and their feelings is about that. And then we do that over and over again until that story doesn't impact them so much. And we talk about, well, how do we want to rewrite that? And then we rewrite the story. And then once they're done, we go through what's called positive psychology, which really is laced in gratitude. So learning how to be grateful, learning how to journal, learning how to bring the positive things in life, learning how to be very intentional with our days. And that's typically the process that I help people through to kind of kill that criticism, because I tell them, like, sometimes you may still have that voice in the back of your head, but if you know how to acknowledge it, if you know that when it's there, then I can take the steps to make sure that I don't do it. So that is, I know that was like a short version of the long process, but That is typically how I help people overcome criticism, is by allowing them to learn who they are to their core, teaching them to think about what they think about so we can begin to shift it in that area, going into the past and really allowing for them to heal those moments, and then teaching them how to be future focused while finding meaning in their right now. And that typically kind of silences that noise for them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's kind of like a journey that I think all of us can benefit from. And I know that you work with individuals, but you're so generous in sharing how you're doing it already. So I'm sure even if our audience don't get to work with you, they can still pick things up from there. Because it's important to get started. Sometimes we just don't know where to start or how to go about certain things. And I think that's kind of the key to navigate through this, is to understand how the process unfolds in the first place. So now let's go into something that is more practical for our audience. They might or might not get to work with you. Hopefully they will. If they don't, then we can leave them with a practice that they can take with them and try, from today onwards. So this is our practice segment. And I would love to ask you to share with us a practice that you do yourself, or a practice that you recommend to everyone that you work with, so that they can overcome the self-criticism, the negative thoughts when they arise.
Absolutely. So I would give about 3 of them. The first one that I would give is what I call the art of the pause. And what do I mean by that? Anytime that I am shifting in a new role or in a new environment, I'm going to take however moments I need, whether it's 30 seconds to 3 minutes, to just be and sit with myself. Like literally just be and sit with myself, taking reset breaths, meditating, looking at the sky, but giving myself a moment to reset before I go into another atmosphere. That right there is going to be your best friend. And I always tell people, again, if you're already running late, what is 30 more seconds to just sit outside the door and take a deep breath before you walk in? So then the things that you just dealt with, you can let it be where it is. And then now you can walk into the space refreshed and renewed. So that's an easy one to do, is just taking a moment to pause, taking a moment to breathe. Don't take what you just went through at work and take it in home. No, before you get out of your car, sit there for a second, take it in, look at your surroundings, taking the proper moment, and then going in and being with your family. Like that right there is so simplistic. The second thing that I would say is gratitude. Gratitude can change your life. When you can find at least one thing that's going well in your life, it will create a light that will permeate the rest of you. And even if it doesn't take away a depressive moment or sadness completely, it gives you that one thing that shows you that your life is worth living, that shows you that it's worth the fight, that shows you to come in. So gently just ask yourself, what is one thing I can be grateful for? And even if that is the fact that I can move my thumb in text, that's something to be grateful for, because without my thumbs, I can't do that. I can't open up the door. I'm not going to be able to do certain things. So I tell people, even if it's just those little minuscule things, we can do that, or the ability to look up at the sky and see the sun. There are some people who can't do that. The ability to hear music, the ability to hear you talk to me. There's some people that cannot do that. So finding that one thing that can remind you that your life is worth living is what I'll say. And then thirdly is an actual practical activity that I call the inner child healing letter. So our brains are very smart, but sometimes it doesn't act like it. But there's an activity where if there is a portion of your story, or let's say a person, let's do this a little simple. If there is one person in your life that you're just dying to get an apology from, they just won't give it to you because they just can't. With your non-dominant hand, which is attached to the childlike self of you that is back here in your fight or flight space, if you write with your non-dominant hand a letter to that person, you can bring up the things that you need to say without having to include that person. So without judging, just write. Whether you write it in a letter form, whether it's just words, whether you're doodling and activities, but with your non-dominant hand, it gives that childlike self a voice. When you're done writing that letter with a non-dominant hand, you don't want to read it silently to yourself. Nobody else is going to read this letter but you're going to read it silent to yourself. And then once you finish that with your dominant hand, the one that you write with, because that is attached to your resilient part of your brain, is now a connection between both of your hemispheres. And then you're going to write a letter of empowerment to yourself on a separate piece of paper, because we're going to destroy the first letter, right? So on the separate piece of paper, then you're going to write, let's say, Dear Lu, and then you're going to have this whole entire, how did I make it through this? If I need this space, if I can give the words that I need to hear today, what do I tell myself? And then you'll have that empowerment letter. And then at the end, now you have two different letters. One you're going to destroy to represent that no longer has power over you. But then you're walking away with this resiliency letter that you can pull from whenever you need it if you're having a hard moment. And that is an activity that I tend to walk my clients through that anybody can do. You can do it for various things. You can do it for an actual situation. You can do it for a person. You could do it if you lost a loved one and you wasn't able to tell them how you felt. But there's various things that you can do, but those will be the three. And that will be having the art of the pause, taking a moment to breathe. It will be having that spirit of gratitude, and then doing that inner child healing letter whenever there's something that really keeps you stuck.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing not just one, but 3 different practices that we can try from today. And I think one of them, at least one of them, is already really in line with what we hear quite often on the show. So I really hope that from today they get reaffirmed that it really helps with not just one, but many aspects of our well-being, which is gratitude. And I really hope that everyone would try that. So thank you. And now we're towards the end of the show. I really want to continue this conversation because, I'm learning a lot of new insights today, but we have to wrap it up soon. And before we let you go, we have open mic, and this is your platform to talk about anything that you are passionate about. Doesn't have to be about this topic, could be about anything else. So the floor is all yours, Mylira.
Absolutely. So I'm very passionate about self-love. I tell people that self-love is not selfish, it's actually worship. Is a way that we get to share with our creator, whoever we decide that is, to say thank you for creating me. Thank you for being intentional with me. And the way that I do that is I tell people you have to embrace your story. There's no reason why you judge yourself when it's your story, because your story is what's going to precede your purpose. A lot of the time our pain becomes purpose. I do what I do because of pain. I continue to develop because of pain. And once we can do that, we know that we're empowered, meaning that I'm not powerless. I still get to choose every day the life that I want to live because I'm lovable. That no matter what I do, I have enough, I've done enough, I am enough, and I am lovable just the way that I am, which allows me to be faithful to my goals, dreams, and my aspirations. Once I can embody that self-work of my story and being empowered and being lovable and faithful, then I can move to the actual love piece. And that love looks like being liberated to be unapologetically myself. So then when opportunities come knocking, I'm ready. And if there are moments where I just have a dark cloud because life is lifing, then I'm realizing that I'm going to allow those outside of me to serve as ventilation for me. Whether that is my therapist, whether it is my life coach, whether that is my significant other and the people that I'm sharing love with, or my family and my friends, whoever that is, I'm going to allow for them to serve as CPR and a reminder to my goals, my dreams, and aspirations, that I can be held accountable to what I said I want to do so that I can continue to evolve. And if you didn't notice, I just spelled self-love. So again, really being able to embrace your story, the empowered, you're lovable, be faithful to your goals, live liberated so that you can have those opportunities, allowing for others to ventilate you so you can continuously evolve. That is what life is all about. It's evolution. We're always becoming. You never reach your destination until you die. Mm-hmm. So Absolutely. If you are always becoming, then that is going to be important. And that also eliminates the self-criticism that we have. If I look forward to, there is something else that I can accomplish in my lifetime, through me loving myself, through me seeing my value, through me seeing my worth, then that is a life, my friend, that's truly worth living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Self-love is what we need more of at all times. And I am so glad that we're closing the podcast with that message, because I do think that is a powerful message, and it's never going to get too much or too repeated. The more we talk about it, the more we're going to embrace it. So thank you so much. And thanks again for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed myself.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.